Today, I find myself in downtown Salt Lake City with the opportunity to speak with Elder Tad Callister. How are you?
I'm doing just great. Thank you.
Good. Now, you're fresh off being released from a calling here. How's that feel?
Well, my wife is thrilled because she's got a huge to-do list for me.
Yeah?
Yes, she does.
It's been a few decades, probably, that list has been accumulating.
So I'm grateful you got me out of the garden weeding down here. If you could prolong this as long as you can.
Okay, sure, absolutely. So, do you have a new calling yet? Has your bishop jumped into action there?
No, I'm just assisting my wife. She's teaching the gospel doctrine class.
Oh, okay.
And I'm running the computer and pushing the buttons.
Oh, good. Well, that's fun. So, what's a transition like that for you when especially in a general presidency like that? How long ago did this transition begin for you to lead that role?
Well, I think we've known for a while that it's a 5-year calling.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's pretty much to the conference that
it is. Yeah. It is to the April conference. So we knew that it was coming, and we had been graciously invited into the First Presidency's office, where they extended a release to all of us and to our wives. They're very gracious about that. And I had a book that I've been working on, new one that I knew I wanted to spend some time on. I knew that we both wanted to spend a little more time with our grandkids. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to do some things around the house. So I felt like there was plenty to do for a while. Uh-huh. So I'm happy at the stage of life.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, and that book you mentioned is called A Case for the Book of Mormon, which is freshly released through Deseret Book. And when I saw the title of this, it reminded me of not your most recent conference talk, but a recent one where you talked about some of these concepts about the Book of Mormon. So which came first, the conference talk or the book?
Well, I think the book has been gestating for many, many years. And I spent maybe 2 years of concentrated time after I gave the talk. I had files at home, and because I was interested in the Book of Mormon with lots of questions I'd had about the Book of Mormon, possible answers. So I'd say I'd been working on the book almost for a lifetime, but it was concentrated for the last 2 years, and it followed the conference talk. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Nice. In your background, you're an attorney by trade, is that right?
Yes.
And obviously, A Case for the Book of Mormon, that's sort of a legal spin to it. And as I've written not only this book, with other of your books that you've written, there's this thorough review of every angle of certain doctrines and aspects of it. Do you credit some of your law practice and some of those habits to that approach to the doctrine?
I think the law practice has been helpful. It forces you to try to go to the core issue. Mm-hmm. It forces you to try and understand what are the opposing arguments. And it forces you to try and crystallize and articulate in the fewest possible words what your defense or offense is that you're taking. So I think that was helpful training, yes.
Yeah. And you mentioned you accumulated some questions over time. What does that... what's your general approach to your personal study that sort of sends you off down these paths that later turn into a book? Well,
I think I used to just read the scriptures. Now I think I do a little better job at trying to ponder them and spend a little time trying to figure out what is the doctrinal principle that's trying to be taught here. And I found out the questions are very helpful, and sometimes an immediate answer comes. Lots of times it doesn't, and I try to research what an answer might be. Although I learned a great lesson when writing an earlier book, and I was listed all of my questions, and I was about to go to the commentaries to find all the answers, and the thought came to myself, don't do that. First, try to find the answer on your own. And I found out that when I did that lots of times the answer I got may have been the same as the commentary when I went to double check myself, but now it was my personal revelation, not someone else's. Or that I had a little different insight from the commentary that I would have never received if I had yielded to the temptation to go to the commentary first. It would have tainted me.
Yeah.
So I think there is value in trying to ponder first, resolve your own questions, and then if you can't, go to the commentaries, but don't let them be the automatic default that you go to. And that's part of the new come follow me mentality also, is try to figure it out first to the best of your ability.
Yeah, that's so powerful to think, because the commentaries, especially in this day and age, you go downstairs to the Deseret Bookstore, you walk in there and there's all sorts of commentaries that look so fascinating, and to hear, scholars or intellectuals sort of take these concepts apart and put them back together and give you a new perspective. But there's power in sort of not just defaulting to that and letting them spoon feed you with the answer, but finding it on your own.
Yeah, I think the commentaries are wonderful, but I think they're a secondary source after you first explored your intellectual and spiritual, attributes that you have.
Yeah. So, I'm curious, as far as, do you have certain routines or models you follow as far as your personal study, or is it mainly you sit down in the scriptures and do you journal at the same time? I mean, anything come to mind as far as your habits?
Well, I always try to study first in the morning, the scriptures. Even when I was in the law practice, my dad and two brothers and myself were all in the law practice together. My dad always suggested we study the scriptures first in the morning. And I found that was good. It was like the axeman who keeps sharpening his axe. It makes you more productive the rest of the day in all ways. And then I found it was helpful to write in connection with what I was learning. And so I've always tried to be working on writing something, because that really does force you to crystallize your thoughts and to summarize them and put them in a smaller perspective as you can. So I found out that writing for me, along with reading, were the two best ways for me to study the scriptures.
And then you mentioned, as far as having questions, I mean, bringing questions to that study or asking questions as you go, I would assume that would be pivotal.
It is. Part of the pondering to me is asking questions. And I found it's helpful too. I'll ask my wife the question. I'll ask our kids the question. When we were in the Sunday school presidency, we'd all ask each other questions. I found that was one of the best possible ways to learn, is to ask questions, try to find the answer, and then discuss it with other people.
Wow, that's powerful. And as I was going through the book, by the end of chapter 2, I thought, okay, case closed. Like, there's nothing else to discuss. Like, I'm convinced. Now, obviously, I brought a testimony of the Book of Mormon with me, but there really is a strong, as far as, especially in the beginning of the book, you sort of bring logic into the discussion. But then other points you talk about, gaining a testimony. So as far as because a lot of people can go to logical statements like, how could a young man or someone like Joseph Smith, an uneducated man, write such a book or come up with this on his own? So therefore it must be true. But how do you balance as far as logic and spiritual experience with artifact like the Book of Mormon?
Well, I think honestly they can go hand in hand. I think reason can destroy faith, but reason can also strengthen faith. So the first part of the book really is, it's designed to answer some of the difficult questions that are out there by the critics. But the second half of the question is to say, okay, we've had your fun now. We've answered your question. Now we're going to go on the offense. You answer our questions. And here are the tough questions for you to answer. Number one, how did Joseph Smith come up with all of this doctrine in the Book of Mormon, which is incredible when you start going through it? Number two, how did he come up with all of these incredible phrases that we have on our refrigerator doors and everywhere else?
Yeah.
Three is, where did he get all these loyal witnesses who have these incredible testimonies repeatedly? How did he make this Book of Mormon comply with Bible prophecy? And why is it that I have the same spirit when I read the Book of Mormon that I have when I read the Bible? Because they're both the Word of God. So I would just say that logic and the spirit can go hand in hand, and they should.
Yeah.
That's why we're required to study and read and ask and ponder, so that we've done our homework. In fact, I think it was President Eyring who asked President Lee, how do you get revelation? You got to do your homework.
Yeah, right.
And so I think, but the spirit can't be left out. It's the capstone. It's the sure way to know. But I think if you've done your homework, it invites the spirit in greater proportions.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. With a book like this, when you publish it, do you have a specific audience in mind, or what do you hope the book accomplishes?
I think that's a good question. I did have an audience in mind. One is I wanted to be able to help strengthen the testimonies of people who already had good testimonies, but hopefully immunize them against questions that might come in the future that they were not aware of, or help them teach these truths to their children so that when their children receive some of the questions, they weren't caught off guard and they could say, oh yeah, I know that. And I think there's a good answer for that. It also was designed to be to an audience who wanted to know the truth, but they were troubled maybe by some intellectual questions. And it was designed to help them and say, we may not have the answer to every question, but we sure have the answers to a lot of them.
Yeah.
And this ought to be a good evidence to you that what you're reading intellectually makes sense as well as spiritually makes sense. And third, it was a little bit to put the critics on alert that we're not going to passively just let them make these statements, many of which are half-truth. And there's a chapter that talks about a partial truth when presented as the whole truth is an untruth. And to try and keep the opposition honest if they're going to attack us. So those were some of the audiences. Hoping.
Awesome. And is there a specific half-truth that comes to mind that you mentioned in the book that as an example of how we are sometimes deceived by half-truths?
Yes, there is. One is, and for many years it's been saying that there's anachronisms in the Book of Mormon. For example, they claim that whether it's Mesoamerica or North America, I'm not trying to say the location for the Book of Mormon,
sure.
But during that time period, they said, we've not found horses or not found oxen. We've not found sheep. We've not found silk. We've not found steel. Therefore, the Book of Mormon can't be true. Well, the half-truth is that they present this as though the main archaeological work for ancient America has already taken place. The truth is that less than 2% of the archaeological finds have been unearthed. In fact, many people say it's 1/10 of 1%. So if you now put that in perspective and say, well, but you were the same critics who said they didn't have cement in these times, and now we've discovered cement. You're the same critics who said there weren't metal plates, but we've now discovered metal plates. You're the same critics that said Alma was only a woman's name, not a man's name, and we've now found that it's also a man's name. You're the same critics who said there was no domesticated barley. Now we have domesticated barley. That's what we found in less than 2%.
Yeah.
Imagine what we could find in the other 98%. So to me, it was a partial truth to say these were anachronisms and presented in the context that we have a fair representative of all the archaeological work for that time period.
Yeah.
Completely untrue.
Yeah. And because I remember reading that less than 2%, because I guess the general world it almost feels like everything's been discovered, like we're there, and science is settled with some of these things. But there, like you said, there's so much more that we will learn, right?
Right. And I used an example in the book. I said, suppose somebody surveyed 2% of the United States, 2% of the geographic area of the United States. And when he was done, he said, I can now tell you that there are no Everglades in the United States. There are no volcanoes. There are no mountains in excess of 10,000 feet. There's no gold mines. There's no oil wells. There's no large lakes. I can categorically tell you that. What would you say?
Oh, we have no idea, right? There's so much more to find out.
Exactly right. It's the same response with people who tell you these things are not in Book of Mormon times. Say, how would you possibly know? Yeah. We have 1/10 of really 1% is what some of the people say. There's much more to be discovered. And what's amazing is that they've already discovered some of these things that you once claimed were anachronisms.
Yes. Yeah, that's fascinating. And I appreciate and obviously it's no doubt by divine design that not that, there's obviously some clear logical arguments and some general evidences of the Book of Mormon, but not enough to diminish that and the importance of that spiritual witness that we really all need to have, right? And that's where it begins. And these things just sort of validate it and are on top of that witness.
I think that's totally true. And it's the same for the Bible.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to get an intellectual witness, I think, of the Bible just based on archaeological findings and linguistics. Somewhere they've got to receive a spiritual testimony. It's exactly the same principle for the Book of Mormon as well as the Bible.
Yeah, that's powerful. I'm sort of curious. Obviously, this podcast we talk about leadership, and you're the grandson of LeGrand Richards, a great leader. What could you teach us about him as far as what he taught you about leadership? Anything come to mind specifically?
I would say one is that he was kind of a common man leader. He loved everybody. He associated with everybody. He related to everybody. Nobody felt overwhelmed by him intellectually, even though he was very bright.
Yeah.
They just felt like you could sit down and have a conversation with him and he was your friend instantly. And secondly, one of the story I told us, he honestly just loved people. I was about 24 years old in law school in California, and our ward won the baseball tournament for Southern California when they used to have the all-church tournament.
Yeah.
He came up here to Salt Lake to play in the all-church tournament. It was late July. maybe early August. It was really hot, about 2:00 in the afternoon. We had like 2 or 3 people in the stands because our wives were all home watching the kids who were young married couples. And all of a sudden, my grandfather walks in to the stadium, sits on the bleachers. And I said, "Grandfather, what are you doing here? You got a lot more important things to do." He said, "No, I don't have anything more important to do than to watch my grandson play baseball."
Oh, wow.
And that was just, he was very personal, and I think sometimes you can lose touch with the people underneath you. That's might be easy to do, but he never did. He was a family man and he was a friend man. That was, I think, part of the greatness of his leadership. Everybody could relate to him, and he had a sense of humor.
Oh, I was just going to mention that. Everybody remembers that
humor. And it's always easier to take advice from somebody who has a little bit of a sense of humor.
Right.
Okay, I can take that. Maybe I need to improve on that.
That's fantastic. I'm curious, as far as I just got an email the other day, or I interacted with a bishop who had just been called, and this bishop said, is my Sunday school president, newly called Sunday school president, came to me and said, "Why? I know the handbook says I need to be in ward council, but why do I need to really be in ward council?" He just didn't see the value and purpose there. And sometimes on the ward level, the Sunday school president calling sort of, the old joke that, "Oh, you're the bell ringer," and it's maybe difficult to find purpose in that role than maybe, that's clearly laid out like the bishop or the young men's president. How would you respond to that? How could a ward better infuse purpose and meaning into that calling as the ward Sunday school president?
Well, now he's got some really key responsibilities because he's responsible for the teacher council meetings that take place. So in that ward council, he should be talking about the teacher council. And, we're not getting all the Relief Society teachers in there, and we really need them. Or, "Did you know your Relief Society teacher made a presentation at our teacher council? This is fantastic. This is what she did." Or one of our responsibilities as teachers is not just to teach the lesson. Every one of us has the responsibility to reach out to people who are not in our class. Are your teachers doing that? And young men, young women, are they doing that in Relief Society? Are they doing that in priesthood? We're trying to help them do that in Sunday school. And how are we doing on the individual and family study? Is the Relief Society giving people an opportunity in their Relief Society class to report on what's happening in their homes? Is the priesthood doing that? Are they giving the chance to report on the individual and family component? So I think there's a lot of things that a Sunday school president can do if he has the vision to see that everybody in the ward is studying the scriptures on a regular basis and that we're increasing the caliber of teaching in all of our classes.
Yeah. It sounds like, it really needs to be a very proactive calling, right? That you're following up with a lot of these things that are everything from the teacher council meeting to just teaching in general and making sure that you're a resource there.
In general, the Sunday school teacher Sunday school president has the responsibility to help improve the teaching of every teacher, of every organization, and to see that the individual and family curriculum is being implemented in every home. Yeah.
And that obviously is even more magnified now with the Come Follow Me approach. And that's, I always found it interesting in the handbook that it said that this is verbatim, but the Sunday school president is in charge of teaching at church and at home, right? They have as far as encouraging good teaching at home. And now that makes even more sense now.
And that's the individual and family component.
Right.
They should be seeing that every individual and family is studying the gospel at home. And then that should increase the caliber of our classes at church because the people will becoming better prepared to participate from the homework they've done during the class.
Yeah. If there's anything that defined your time in the Sunday school presidency, it's this Come Follow Me initiative. Was it anything that you would share from that maybe we haven't considered yet as far as the importance of the Come Follow Me and what the overall purpose is?
Well, I think the overall purpose, if I can go back for just a minute, President Nelson's talked about us trying to lift the church to a higher and holier way. And so we've gone from home teaching to ministering. Part of the purpose of the individual and family book is to take us from reading the scriptures to pondering the scriptures and discussing them as individuals and as parents in the home. And parents, I think, generally want to be good teachers. They want to teach the gospel in their home, but they've kind of needed a resource that would just help them to do that and be a catalyst for that. And that's what the individual and family booklet was designed to do, is to say, all right, here are some helps if you're an individual. Here are some helps if you're a parent, to help you teach in the home. And as a little kind of accountability, when you go to Sunday school, they're going to be inviting people to share what they've learned. So that'll be a little opportunity to account. And it does. It kind of moves people forward on a weekly basis. Oh, yeah, I've got Sunday school that next week. This is what we're studying this week. And it's increased the caliber of Sunday school classes substantially. So I think the goal was to increase not just reading, but pondering the scriptures in the homes, and increase the caliber of our Sunday school classes by having people come better prepared rather than just feed me, I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been interesting to see how many more people, I mean, this is a general statement. It seemed like rarely did anybody read the lesson or the scriptures before coming to Sunday school or gospel doctrine. But now, I mean, that's where the engagement, that's like the pivotal part of this program.
I think from our worldwide visits and input that there honestly has been a substantial increase in individual and family study. And the Sunday school teachers tell us that their class members are much better prepared, not just the adults, even the primary children.
Wow. That's great.
As well as the youth. In fact, I went to one primary class in Mexico, and there was 2 converts there, 2 sisters, and they had their individual and family booklet with them with little notes in it from what they'd studied during.
Wow. And so as you, was it part of your calling to travel quite a bit to see different Sunday school programs and things?
We would have 2 international trips a year that would be about 10 to 12 days. And then we would have domestic trips that would be the United States and Canada that would include. So when you have the counselors going out, as well as myself, you get to quite a few places in the world that give you a sampling of what's happening. In fact, I was thrilled when I went to Thailand. I went to one of the 3 best, what I would call teacher council meetings I've ever been to.
Oh, really? Wow.
Including Salt Lake City in Thailand.
Wow.
Now obviously in other places they're more distant. They didn't quite have the grasp of it, but they were striving and learning, but they got it. They got the vision.
Yeah. And did any specific stories come to mind as far as, because it's one of those things that a Sunday school presidency doesn't want to go too far out of the box, but they maybe want to bring their creative approach to it. Did you see examples of that throughout the world where then you take it back to church headquarters and think, okay, they may have something here? Or
I do think that there were certain repeated things that we saw, for example, in teacher council meetings that where people practiced at the end of the teacher council meeting what they had just learned, actually try and practice it right there. That was such an effective tool. It made the meeting so much more productive. That was a big emphasis that we tried to give in the teacher council meetings. And part of that was seeing what happened when you did do it and when you didn't do it throughout the world.
So that role play aspect was beneficial.
Yes, very beneficial.
Interesting.
Which I had one of
please.
too, is that sometimes the comment would be something like this. Well, it's Easter Sunday and, we're studying, for an example, Balaam and the talking donkey on Easter. 7 years of storage or whatever. You're thinking, so why are we doing that on Easter Sunday? Just because it happens to be in the sequence of the lessons. So that was one of the things, I don't know, it just came from that, but discussing what happens on Easter Sunday to say now every Easter Sunday, you're going to have a lesson on the atonement of Jesus Christ, no matter what book of scripture you're in and where you are. And every Christmas, you're going to have a lesson on the life of the Savior so that people can bring their non-member friends, less active, and know that that's going to be a spiritually rich lesson that's in accordance with the reason that we're celebrating.
Yeah, and that's helpful because it can get, you can sort of fall into the routine of it and forget, it's Easter. Maybe we should talk about Christ.
You're just going through the sequential part of the lesson.
Yeah.
You're at the 7 years of famine or whatever, and that's what you teach. But now that part's different. Yeah. Plus, there's been an emphasis on recording notes, that people take notes when they read. And Elder Scott was a good one about that. And he motivated us, I think, by talking about if you receive a spiritual impression, you need to record. And if you do, you'll get more and more spiritual. Yeah, that's powerful. So, and you had a unique, when you were called as the General Sunday School President, typically they don't transition from someone from the 70s, especially the presidency of the 70, to that auxiliary role. What do you remember about that call?
did it come as a surprise to you? Because I guess you were approaching that emeritus status that you thought was coming anyways, but then suddenly they tacked another 5 years.
Yes. Well, it was a surprise. Yes. Maybe sometimes you had a warning.
Right.
Warning. I didn't have any warning.
Okay.
I thought I was just going to be released. And then I was totally shocked when I was called to the Sunday school president. So I don't know how to say that other than, I felt good about the calling. I was just totally surprised.
Yeah. And it just came as a phone call, I imagine, that come down to this office and we have something to tell you, right?
With President George, yeah.
Oh, okay. And then from there, I think a lot of people don't generally understand what that role is as the general Sunday school president. I mean, obviously, overall things Sunday school, but were there certain initiatives or purposes and visions, directives that you were given to carry out in that role?
Well, and they give you a lot of latitude, the brethren do. I think they call you and they trust you and they expect you to receive revelation. But it was clear that they did want teaching to improve in the home and in the classroom. And that was just very general guideline. But that led eventually to developing Teaching in the Savior's Way booklet. And that came out. Teacher Council meeting started in 2016. And during that same time, we were developing the individual and family booklet for the home and a Sunday school manual that was correspondent to it, correlate with it. And the primary did the same thing that correlated with the individual and family. So I think that broad vision led to those specific things that were done. Mm-hmm. And I think the timing was right. Honestly, I don't think it's a secret. I think the brother had been thinking about a 2-hour block for some time.
Yeah.
But I remember one or two of them saying to me, but Ted, we didn't have the missing piece. If we had church that was 1 hour less, what did we have at home to fill that hour? Mm. And somehow when the individual and family booklet came along, all of a sudden there was that natural piece to say, if church is only 2 hours, but we now have something else that will help you as parents or an individual make use of that additional time at home rather than just using it to watch TV.
Right.
I think the Lord brought all the pieces of the puzzle together at the right time.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see the different auxiliaries, sort of the Lord orchestrates those together and suddenly you come out with the next step, right?
Yeah.
Are you required to do certain, trainings as you travel the world or visit different places? Because before you, as a 70, you were visiting as a visiting authority. And what was that dynamic compared to visiting somewhere as a 70 as opposed to a general auxiliary like the Sunday school?
Well, when you visit as a general authority, oftentimes it would be with a reorganization of a stake, or connection with a stake conference, and you're doing leadership training, and you're speaking on whatever subject you think would be most helpful to the members of that stake. But we went with quite a focus. Our focus was to teach in general. How can you teach more like the Savior? It was also designed to take the teachers, talk with them about how they can make teacher councils more effective. We would also have focus groups that would talk about what can we do, what's working for you, what isn't working for you in your stake. And that would give us input that we could bring back to Salt Lake, whether you're in Thailand or whether you're in Sri Lanka or South America, so we could collect all this information. So our prime responsibility was to train people how to teach more like the Savior, how to hold effective teacher council meetings, and to find out what's working and isn't working so we could provide the necessary resources to accomplish that.
Wow. Awesome. I'm curious to go back with your time, because you were served in the presidency of the 70.
Yeah.
And I think that's another presidency that we all look at, like, what exactly are they doing or what are their roles? How would you define that role as being one of the 7 presidents of the 70?
Well, at that time when I was in, I can only really speak for that time.
Sure, yeah.
We were all given various areas of the United States and Canada that we supervised. For example, I had the responsibility for Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma, surrounding areas. And so we were responsible for supervising the area 70s that were in that specific area. It's kind of our part of the vineyard to have prime responsibility for. In addition, we would have direction and training for all of the area 70s and general authority 70s throughout the church in terms of training for them. And then in addition, we would be on various committees that the members of the Quorum of the 12 wanted us to serve on, that might be somebody who was working on the pornography committee, or somebody might be working on those that they're no longer on the church records. How do we get a hold of those people and not lose the lost sheep? Or it might be on public affairs or all these different committees, education. And we would sit on those various committees throughout the church. So it kept you very, very busy.
I bet. Wow. It's fascinating to hear that. So as we wrap up, where obviously people can go to Desert Book and purchase the book, but anywhere else that you would want to make sure people check out the book and consume it. And
well, I just like to say one thing, just so people don't think I'm a book salesman.
Okay.
I don't take any money for the books. They all go to some other charitable enterprise. Okay. And this does too. So I don't know all of the sources. You probably know the sources.
Oh, okay.
And I do.
I know it's on Amazon probably.
And online,
Desert Book
and Desert Book. And so my sincere hope is not to sell books for a monetary reason, but I'm hopefully people will have access to the book.
Yeah, such valuable information.
Whatever testimony it can help strengthen them intellectually and spiritually, which I think should go hand in.
Yeah, perfect. Well, last question I have for you. As you reflect on your time, your 5 years as the General Sunday School president, how did that role as a leader in that capacity make you a better disciple of Jesus Christ?
I would say that being candid and honest, it probably forced me to be more humble because of the various channels that you have to go through to get something approved. Mm-hmm. I'm not speaking ill of those channels. I think those channels are good and they're good filters and whatever. But it forced me to realize that you do need a lot of other people's input, and what you think might always be right isn't always right. And the Lord has a system of check and balances, which I grew to appreciate. And I think also I really grew to appreciate the counsel of my counselors. You don't really have counselors, 7 presidents. You meet in the same room, but they're not the same as counselors. Mm. And they became some of my best friends. And I think I learned how valuable their input was, and it helped me, I hope, be a better listener and hopefully realize that other people have opinions that can be better than your own. And part of being a man of integrity is willing to take whatever the best ideas on the table are, even though they're not your own, and trying to build on those and get the confirmation that the Lord wants. I think I learned that from the staff also. The staff sometimes would have good ideas, and I think sometimes at first I'd think, why didn't I think of that? I'm the son's. And then, well, that was really a good idea. Who cares where it came from? As long as it's a good idea, let's just adopt it and run with it.